Oh, this feels very fancy on a stage with a mic. Hi, welcome everyone. I'm holding this mic because we're live streaming, so bear with me. I'm Annika, and I'm the creative director here at Futurice Stockholm. And I have gotten the honor to introduce Johannes and Vanessa, who you all came here to hear speak. But first, I would like to, where is the clicker? Do we have the clicker? Or yeah, just to say a few words about Futurists and why you are here. Oh, that's so high tech. Did it work? No. Did that work? No. No. Okay, I know this by heart. Basically, what we say about Futurice is that we help companies become future compatible. And with that, it means that we help from strategy to design to data science, and then we actually build stuff. So it's all connected. So Vanessa and Johannes and me is usually waving our hands up at the C-level people. So how can innovation be happening at big corporates or small corporates? And then usually we find ideas and we co-create together with clients. And I have a nice picture here that shows, maybe we should have that one. Just to show that we are 550 people in Europe, and we have the head office in Helsinki, and we have an office in Tampere, Oslo, Stockholm, London, Berlin, and Munich. And maybe some other place as well. It's unofficial yet. And out of these 550 people, we have Vanessa. And yeah, and I actually asked Vanessa yesterday, so this is about helping companies become future capable. What does that mean for you and in your work? And you said, it means, my note. It helps them, you help them rethink, correct me if I'm wrong here, rethink their businesses and help them with their innovation process. But what's also important is that you help them govern their innovation process. And what you said was really good, was that today we don't have strategies that are 5 years old, because what happens in 5 years, it's absolute. So we need to have more agile strategies and so on. And with that, my brilliant colleague.
Hello, good morning. I'm so glad to be here. I mean, half an hour ago there was snow outside. Now there is sun outside. So this is really amazing, and I'm really happy to be here and have you here early in the morning. Who is already awake and who's still sleeping? Okay. Yes, I think I have 20 minutes, right? So I have to be quick in my introduction, because I'm talking about the future of mobility from the perspective of the car manufacturers, so the OEMs. I mean, this topic, I can tell you, is so amazing. So the future of mobility is everywhere. Everyone is talking about it, and it has so many aspects that it's almost hard to cover everything. So I was thinking about, okay, what could be interesting in 20 minutes to introduce to you, to share insights. And I've seen the list of guests, so you come from different competencies, from different industries. So some of you might be already savvy experts, so what can I tell you then? And some of you probably have not yet gained so many insights in mobility. So I try to cover a bit of sharing insights with you, what is the challenges that the OEMs are facing and what is like their thinking in strategy? Because as you heard, I think a lot about strategy and where the companies need to go in the future. And I can tell you it's so complex and there is no silver bullet at all. And we at Futurists, we also don't have the silver bullets. So we have to find a way, what are the strategic options that we can uncover and where can we take these OEMs to? And of course, because we come from Germany, we have a special perspective, especially from the German manufacturers. But let's see if this is also relevant for other industries. So what I will do now is that I will shortly introduce to you what is the status quo at the moment for the OEMs, what keeps them awake at night. But then I will tell you a bit more about the broader perspective. So what is the other things that are probably not on the list that are also super important because they influence the future of these OEMs? And what are the risks and the challenges behind it? And then I will introduce like 4 potential strategies you could follow as an OEM. And yeah, that's a bit of like how I structured this talk. So are we ready to start? Okay. Interesting. Does that work? Here. Yeah, first thing to say is that smart facts on mobility and automotive are all over the place. So we have so many really great companies and consultancies that already give you all the numbers and all the facts. So it seems like everything is already said. So, and I didn't want to like cover all these facts here and tell them to you, so tried to find another angle as well. And not only from the experts, but also from many other people, we have a lot of comments and opinions everywhere. So this is from the weekend, from the New York Times, where an expert told that owning a car will soon be like owning a horse, so no one will own a car anymore in the future. So these are like the talks that are going on and on mobility and cars. So yeah, everyone seems to have an opinion on what mobility is taking us to, and especially the OEMs. Let's see what is the status quo of the manufacturers. What is keeping them awake at night? So what are the topics at the moment? Yeah. Actually, there was supposed to be a picture of climate change. Maybe the Earth is already gone. There it is. Yes, so it's about climate change, but not in a sustainable way, rather than, okay, what does that mean for their business? So they think a lot at the moment on the topic of WLTP. So for those who don't know what WLTP is, who knows what this is, what that means? Not too many. So in the end, it's about the emissions of cars, and their entire portfolio of cars is not supposed to make a certain level of emissions. So all the manufacturers are not struggling with, okay, how can we reduce our emissions and be within the regulations? And this is really something that is struggling a lot. They are struggling a lot. You can see from the diesel scandal and the stuff like that, that the governments really forced them to take care of all their emissions. Then we have another topic. It's the electrification thing. And that's really very, very interesting, because the fact is that the way you build cars is suddenly changing from having a lot of components, like for example 2,500, and now building an electric car is only 250 pieces. So what does that mean? Everyone can build an electric car. The suppliers can build an electric car. Another company can build an electric car. Even Google could build a car, can they? So this is changing massively, because what is the business then if everyone can do it, if it's so easy to do it? So, and it also changes the way that people purchase cars. Maybe you can buy it online. You don't go to the dealer anymore. Oh my God, so the whole business model is being changed by this thing. So this is really something very, very interesting. And the big companies, they try to face this topic. Of course, autonomous driving is everywhere. Everyone talks about it. Probably the horizon is a bit further up, but everyone is keeping himself busy with how can they manage all these things, and the software and the data becomes more important here, and the connectivity everywhere. So this is also something that they are thinking about, and with that comes the data management and protection. What are we going to do with all the data? Who is owning the data? Yeah, what are you? I think you're going to talk about the data and the trust topic. So this is also something that keeps them busy at the moment, how they are going to set up this entire data system and cloud systems. And of course, what we mainly talk about in our business is the digital services, the mobility as a service topics, the ecosystems that come with it. So I think this is the most mentioned topic at the moment, that there's so many new players come into this field. And the software topic becomes more and more important, and this is of course our business as well, the digital services and the software. And this is one of the key problems at the moment, that you change from being a car manufacturer to become a software company. And this is really a big trouble. Why is that? The cycles in how cars are built are totally different from how software is built. So the cycle management is 5 to 10 years. So today, an OEM is planning in 5 to 10 years. And they need to plan that in a waterfall approach. So this is totally different from how you build software. But when it comes into the car, I mean, it comes together, and then you have these two ways of acting, 2 ways of thinking. How does that work? And this is really something that is a big game changer in the entire OEM industry. And they didn't yet find the solution. And is a car manufacturer a good digital company? Are they good in this whole technology thing? So this is really something that's heavy. But this is not everything. There's way more than that. And this is why I'm going to give you a broader introduction of what is happening outside in the world that is also affecting the car manufacturers and the OEMs. Because I find it interesting to think, okay, what else is happening that can influence their strategy? Because the big OEMs, they have a lot to lose. They are not just a startup having a bit of money and testing out stuff. I mean, they have 1 million blue-collar workers in the entire world. They have systems running for ages. How are they going to survive? So it's not that easy to just do a bit of digital services and then we will save our business. So let's see what else is out there where they have to find a solution and a strategy. Not only being a producer, but who's going to provide all the electrification. Did you know that if you want to charge a car, you need high voltage energy? How are you going to bring that into the cities, and who's going to provide this? Who's going to manage that? Who's going to maintenance that? So it's not only building a car, it's also organizing the entire infrastructure around it. Could be a chance, but also that's a massive challenge. Customer situation might change. Maybe the car is not owned by, like we do it today, maybe the owner of the car in the future, when it comes to like autonomous driving or other ideas, the owner of the car might be the government, the city, or whoever, companies. So this situation is also something we have to consider, that this is changing their business models. Or not only autonomous driving, but also, if you see this on the picture, there might be new businesses that can be served as a service in the, like, getting from A to B. Suddenly new business ideas can come up. Who's going to take that part of the business in the future? And then it's not only about vehicles, it's also about the traffic. Interestingly, like I think in Kuala Lumpur, Alibaba, the Chinese Amazon company, has already started traffic management with the AI. So it's somehow scary. I mean, who is owning the traffic? And then we have a Chinese software company managing the traffic. Wow, this is interesting. But this is something that we have to consider, that it's not only about the vehicle, it's also about the traffic thing. Then we talk a lot about urban stuff, but we also need to consider that the rural part is also interesting. How are we going to bridge the cities and everything? And I could tell a lot about that 68% of the people are going to live in big cities, but at the same time, the rural parts are as important. So how are we going to tackle that topic? And the transportation with all these things becomes more and more important. And then, which parts in the world are relevant in the future? I mean, this is a picture from Germany. I don't know if you have ever been in Germany, but everything is already set in stone there. So what are the future places where the new big cities might arise, where they would come up? And I think there are other parts in the world where, as an automotive company or mobility company, that might arise that we have not on our page yet. So this means that probably Europe is an old place with older people, but the future might lie elsewhere, probably in Asia, probably at other places. This is where the show is going to happen, maybe. So we need to shift our perspective. Also, not Europe is the center of the world, but there may be other places in the world that become relevant. Also because of the amount of people in Asia, I think, and in Africa in the future, 80% of the population will live there. So this is interesting to look at, okay, what's next? And now everyone is talking about China. I would say maybe Africa is the next place to be. No one is talking about that one. But this is where probably in 2050, 80% of the population will live. And when it comes to data and where the cars are, where the mobility will happen, it will probably be the most interesting place. And then another topic, which is probably a bit critical, but in Europe, we have democracy, we have many rules. A country like China is much faster in innovation. They are supported by the government. What does that mean for democratic environments? Where do you put your innovation effort into, or where can you make innovation happen? So this is also critical topic that you need to consider when you are an OEM and a big company, how you're going to tackle that topic. And of course, it's not about only producing many, many entities and assets, because that might mean that we really take all the resources out. So do we want to spoil and only think in selling cars and mobility assets? Or is there anything else that we need to consider when it comes to using all the resources? And this is what I talk about, not only having the business in mind, but also thinking about, okay, what is the topic of ethics, the human-machine interaction, and the sustainability things. And this is becoming really, really important in the future, and we have to find solutions for that, and especially the OEMs. So, what's the future game an OEM should play? That's an interesting question. And there is no silver bullet. There is no answer. What are the 4 potential options? And this is worth discussing later, maybe. What are strategic options? Number 1, you could stick to your core. I mean, you could be the best producer of vehicles in the world, but that would mean that you would need to be more efficient and more adaptive to what comes in the future, and be better prepared. But that could be one option. Another option could be to diversify. So as the need for many different vehicles will come up in the future due to the many opportunities, you could diversify and have a better portfolio and make money with that and be successful. Third one is if you're not an expert in software, if you're not an expert in producing electric vehicles, you could build strong alliances and partnerships. And this is what's actually going to happen now. Volkswagen did a big cooperation with Microsoft to manage their cloud system and connect all their cars. And they just worked together with Ego, which is a small company building electric cars, because they are much faster at that. So if you are not an expert in one field, you could partner up. And this is what's happening, for example, also with Daimler and BMW. they collaborate with each other because one will probably not make it. So you have to find an ecosystem with companies that like make you better than you are. And the fourth option could be new markets. So why does an OEM today building cars need to make cars in the future? And Toyota wanted to acquire Biocorps from Google, and they said that, okay, in the future we are probably not going to produce only cars, but also robots, because this is also a very, very complex thing that they might probably want to discover. So new markets are also an option that are not in the mobility sector. Okay, so that was only 4 things that could probably be relevant from a strategic perspective. And yeah, I found it really interesting that if I were a CEO, I would not have an answer for that because it's so complex. There's so many things you need to consider, and we don't have the truth, so we don't know yet. And everyone is trying to make sense out of this mobility universe, and what should we do? And it's really, there are a lot of options, but we don't have an answer yet. And this is probably the key challenge from a strategy perspective. Can we plan 20 years ahead, 10 years ahead? Or how does that work? How do we do this in the future? But in the end, for the big companies, for the big OEMs, they have to find a solution that helps them survive and where they find their profit pools in the future. And yeah, I would say a very interesting topic to follow up and see who's taking what direction. Small manufacturers might have a total different strategy than the big ones. So I find that very interesting. How can we help them, or what are the approaches that might probably serve them, help them to find the right potential answers? What is important in the future when you talk about the strategy and how to get there? You need a global corporate strategy. You can't look from just one perspective, just from the European perspective. You have to look at the world, and maybe different markets need different things. So you have to find this broader strategy. And your strategy process needs to be more adaptive. So you can't just plan 10, 20 years ahead and not change your strategy. So you have to find a balance, having the right direction, taking the right decision, and at the same time being flexible enough to adjust and to pivot. And I think this is a key challenge as well. How do you manage that and get from the waterfall to the more agile approach? I found that very interesting. Partnerships and ecosystem alliances, super relevant in the future. No one will play the game just by themselves. No one will win the game. Even Google couldn't manage to build a proper car. Tesla is struggling with building car in masses. So building a car seems not to be that easy. So also they need to have alliances with other companies. We need innovative business models. So there needs to be more. If owning a car is not the topic anymore, we need to find new revenue streams. So the business model innovation, our field, is very, very interesting and can help to find the path to the future. And everyone who is in M&A, mergers and acquisitions, I think that this will be the new normal. Acquiring a company, partnering up, and if it doesn't work, sell it again. But this is a key topic as well. And in the end, it comes to corporate transformation, because it's not only about the business, it's also about helping the organization adjust, helping the people adjust. So it's not only the business thing, it's a comprehensive corporate transition that will be an ongoing process, ways of working, culture, identifying new potentials, making them happen. And yeah, to bring this all together in just one word or in a nutshell, we probably need to help the companies, or the companies need to be resilient in the future. So change and change over and over again without losing your track. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vanessa. Questions, we will handle them later. And now it's time for our head of design, Johannes, and you work with a lot of the car companies, Porsche, BMW, Daimler. And when I asked you, how do you help companies become future compatible? You said you help them see possibilities. And then, since you're a designer at heart, you help them also, make them concrete by prototype by prototype. This is Johannes.
Hey. Let me just change decks here. All right, let's see if this works. Yes, all right, cool. So also a warm welcome from my side. I'm super happy to be here together with you today and talk a little bit about the future of mobility. After Vanessa gave us this big picture overview of what's happening and what are the changes and challenges that we have around the future of mobility, I want to dive in a little bit more, zoom in a little bit more, and talk about the importance of trust in the digital environment and in the data economy. So that's the topic here. Let me start on how I came across that topic, and specifically about the topic of trust. Within Futurists, we have on a daily basis, we are dealing with data, with customer data, because of a lot of the stuff that we do has to do with coming up with new services and products in the data economy. But it was maybe around 2 years ago when I was involved in a project where we did user research and discovery around charging electric vehicles. So what is the hassle with charging electric vehicles and how can we improve that? We did a big project around that, and I was going through the notes of the user testing a day after, and I found that quote from one of our participants, and this really stuck with me. And I thought, there is really something about the matter of trust and how important trust is to be able to get access to data and to work with data from your customers and provide value based on that. So this was my entry point, and I was looking into other studies and into other publications around data and trust, and I found there's a big pattern emerging, right? That the matter of trust is one of the most important ones when you deal with data, and I want to get you on a quick journey around that topic, right? So very quickly, what is personal data? When we talk about personal data, it's about data that is directly or indirectly related to you, identifiable with you as a person, right? It can be about where you are, where you want to go, how you do in life, how you do in business. So financial data, health data, everything that identifies you, like where you're living, how old are you, social demographic data, all that stuff here. And so it's a huge variety of different kinds of data. I think there are at least three important points when we talk about data and what it is. The one thing is that data cannot be owned like a building or a car, right? There's a lot of talk around data ownership, but we will see a little bit later how difficult that concept is, because data is also not a product. You cannot just package it and put it somewhere. It has a very ephemeral aspect to it, like a shadow when you're walking around, or the trail that you leave in the snow. This is data, and some of those trails, they might be there forever. As you know, the web never forgets, but nevertheless, it's not tangible. Very, very often, it's very intangible what we say data is. And then it's also important because I found myself very often in discussions where everybody's talking about the technology behind data and building data lakes and having the AI that processes the data. But in the end, data itself and personal data is a socio-technological concept, right? It has technology in it. Technology allows us to gather data, to process data, and to work with data, but the data itself the personal data comes from us as humans. And this is very, very important to take in mind, because that is also, of course, why trust as a very important matter for us as humans is so relevant here. And I was reminded on what our former CEO, who is now in the company focusing explicitly on AI and machine learning, what he said when we talked about technology and data, and he said, you need all that technology, but in the end, it's the human factor that matters, right? And this is coming from a person who's really spending all his dedication to making the technology work around data. All right, okay. One important concept around data is what we call data Darwinism. That means that access to data is really maybe the differentiating factor in the 21st century for most of the companies. So while you do not necessarily need to have ownership of your customers' data, you need to make sure that you have a strategy around data that ensures that you get the right quality, the right amount, and the right diversity of data for what you want to do, what you want to offer to your customers now and in the future. And we are really at the risk that just a few companies, the big tech companies, they have a monopoly over the data that is there, because they started very early and their business models, mostly advertising, is based on access to data. So no wonder they are very, very good at that. But it's a game that we should not just leave them to play. We as small companies, mid-sized small companies, but also the bigger corporates, we need to have a strategy around data and how we get access and can use it. Because otherwise, it's GDPR helps, of course, but this is only a beginning point. Otherwise, it could happen like it happened to this poor bird. Who knows that bird? Do you know what kind of bird that is? That is a dodo. He lived some small islands, and this bird cannot fly. And when the first seafarers arrived, this bird was very friendly and was going to the seafarers and saying hello, but they ate it, all of them. So this is an example of an animal who couldn't adapt to a very quick change in its environment. And that's why we call it data Darwinism, because it's really like a selective factor in how sustainable your business will be in the future. You need to have access to data. All right, now we already come to the core of what I want to talk today. We created a very simple framework to make it a little bit more accessible how to talk about data and the role trust plays in it. Let me guide you quickly through that framework. Okay, in the center, of course, we have the customer. Could be a B2C customer, could be your B2B partner. That doesn't matter, but the person is in the center, and it's important to see this from a human-centered perspective. Then we have the three factors. We have data, we have trust, and we have value. These are the most important things for this triangle here. And here's how the virtuous circle works, if it works. Yay. All right, cool. So you have access to the data of your customers, at least a little bit. Based on that data, you can provide value-added services. You can enrich, enhance your products. And based on that value, you gather more trust from your customers. It's very, very simple. Of course, also simplified. But I found out in many conversations with clients that it really helps, it really helps to to understand how that works together, right? Okay, cool. Once more. Good. Yeah, and it's speeding up. That's why it's a virtuous circle, right? It enhances each other and gets better and better if you do the right things. All right. Let's make it a little bit more tangible. And I took the example of mobility as a service, so MaaS as an example. So very quickly, for those who are not familiar with this concept, we have a huge infrastructure to move people around and to do transportation. Based on that infrastructure, there are various transportation providers who you can have business relationships with, either as a business or as a private consumer. Let's stay on the private side for a second. You buy your trip with multiple ways of getting around, and the new idea, or the rather new idea for mobility as a service, is that you put another layer on top of that, which bundles all that stuff, brings it together, and makes it very easy for you as a customer to get around, and not just one part of the thing that you need to do, like taking the train or taking the car, but really bringing it together so that it's more consistent and more easy for you to deal with. Yeah, so it's easy for you to buy the whole trip and to adjust everything to your own needs. One example for companies doing that has actually MaaS in its name. It's MaaS Global, coming out of Finland. Maybe that's also why we, as a Finnish company, love to use that example. But it's really a very, very good one. What you see here a little bit is from their WIM app, where you can plan your journeys, how to get around. You can also say, okay, I want to go there. And the difference to other solutions is that it's really multimodal traveling. So it really combines in an intelligent way for you what is the best way to get around. And then you get one offer, so it's just one contract, or it's one-stop payment that you need to do in order to get access to that. And it also, in the future, will adapt to your own needs. So for example, you see it here, you can rent a car for just 7 days a month instead of renting it for the whole month or things like that. So very adaptable to your own needs. That's the idea behind mobility as a service. All right, so how does it work here? Just very quickly. The company needs data. It needs to know who you are, where you are, and where you want to go, and also some financial data for the payment. Based on that, let me just go to the other ones here. On the data, they can provide the value that I just described a little bit, and this earns more trust. At the beginning, and this is a difficult point, they were an award-winning but unknown Finnish startup. So it's not so easy to start, but as soon as you have some trust from your clients, from your customers, it's way easier to get into the circle. And we will see later what your brand, if you have already existing brand, can do for you to gather data and provide value. All right, I'm speeding up a little bit so that we can see most of it. What are the challenges? Let's talk about the data and access to data first. It's really that data is challenging for not only the organizations, but also for the consumers themselves, for us as people. 3 aspects that I want to mention here. The first thing is that we very often see in discussions with our clients that they tend, maybe it's I'm mostly, or used to work mostly in Germany, maybe it is also very a German thing, but we heavily focus on the liability, so on the dangerous part of on the risky part of data. But so I find myself very often in discussions with data security officers and people like that, where you really need to remind those people that data is also something that has possibilities and opportunities. And of course, you need to be very, very careful how you deal with data. But you should make sure that not the good ideas, the new innovation ideas, get thrown out of the bathtub just because it's risky. Business in general is risky, and a lot of the future business depends on data. All right. Then there is this concept around data ownership. We should provide more ownership to customers, to us as individuals, of our own data. But there are also a lot of experts who say, actually, ownership of data, like you own an asset, like you own your home, is not really possible because data is floating around everywhere. So we need to instead strengthen the data rights, like GDPR is doing in Europe, and in Singapore we have similar things in Canada. So this is also very interesting to look at. And there is also, like Vanessa said earlier, there is no silver bullet there yet. There are some interesting concepts floating around, and each company needs to find its own stance regarding ownership and data rights. And the third thing is the cognitive load that data creates. We see that again in user testings, in qualitative inquiries that we do with customers, with real clients out there for our customers, that people very often are overloaded with the sheer amount of data that they need to manage. And we can only see that increasing in the future. So there's a big opportunity for companies who manage that data in a way that you feel good about it, to make business with that problem. It's a real need that is created. Nobody can go through longish usage conditions or terms of how to use a certain service. So it's very important to get smarter at that. All right, just some solutions. I just randomly picked some for the ownership of data, just for you to see that it's NGOs, it's startups, it's governments who are more and more taking care of that problem and try to come up with solutions here. Like marketplaces, where you can sell your data, or maybe go to HEDX over there, small decentralized microservers where you can store your data and then allow companies to get access to that data. All right, value. This is the thing that we provide to the customers, because in the end, it's about, of course, it's about the thing that we do with data. It's not an end in itself, but it's a means to provide value, and a lot of that value in the future will be based on the data that you provide. And it's super important, again, coming from our conversations and work with various clients, that you remind yourself constantly that the new type of value is co-created. In the past, it was about you creating a car, for example, in the best way possible and supplying that into the market. That's not so much possible anymore. And we see a lot of projects failing because the users and the future customers were not taking into consideration, were not part of building that service. So that is very, very important here. All right. Another very important point from the human perspective is that it's not what you think is valuable, it's what they think is valuable. And you see an adaptation of the Maslow pyramid here, where you say, okay, we can provide functional benefits, we can provide emotional benefits, or if we're very lucky and work very hard, we might be even able to provide life-changing benefits to our customers. If you manage to do that in a super good way, your customers will be very, very happy and will also become very loyal to what you provide to them. All right, why is that so important? Because the economic power is shifting, right? It's been before on the supply side, right? There was just not enough stuff out there, but it changed already in the mid of the 20th century, changed that. But now it's very clear that the customer is in power and will be empowered even more so with good regulations, good policies. And this is actually the one very hard fact, economic fact around all this talk about customer centricity. You just need to focus on your customer, because otherwise you will be out of business. Your customer is driving the show here. All right. The third point is trust. Yeah. So how can you gain and keep the trust of your customers? And this is a quote from Sampo, who is the CEO of this Mars Global company, who said, yes, there are a lot of people saying data is the new oil, and in a way it's correct because it's a raw material that you can work with, but in the other way, it's the data is rather cheap. What is super valuable and expensive is the trust that you need to have in order to get continuous access to data. Because the old question is still super relevant. Can I trust you? Whenever we want to do business with somebody, very often complete strangers, we as humans are very good in identifying with a glance if this person is trustworthy or not. And in the future, when we as consumers become more and more data savvy, because we are only about to understand the value that lies in our data, right? If we become more and more data savvy, we will also be very more careful and cautious about who we will give our data. And we are living in an age where the direct interaction with your customer is not coming through people anymore, but more and more it comes from technology. Technology is the enabler and the intermediary between you and your customer, so it becomes part of your brand. And when machine learning, when AI talks with your customer, interacts with your customer, you have to make sure that this technology is fed with the right kind of data about your customers, because otherwise the technology will not represent you in a good way towards your customer, and this creates, of course, problems. So trust is also very important here. Maybe jump over that here. If it let me. With all of that, we shouldn't forget that it's essentially the human side that matters with data, because based on data, we make decisions. I have a lot of conversations with people focusing on AI, and they say that the more important a decision is, the less a machine is able to do that, and they also see that this will be there forever. So we shouldn't assume that machines will make all the decisions for us. The important decisions will still be made by people, and that's why it's very, very important that we think about all those challenges from a human perspective. What's also very interesting, the difference between us as humans and the data that we have is more and more blurring, right? We will see more and more people that have technology not only as a wearable on their armrest, but also implemented in the body. And this is why data becomes more and more part of what we are. And we have it right now already. I mean, data represents us on social media, in our health records and financial records. We are data in a way. And this is also very important. And the last point here is I think where we are, if society develops in a good way, my personal take on it is that we accept data mobility as a basic right for people, which means that my data is floating in the whole system, in the whole ecosystem, like I want it to float. And I can make access to my data and have access whenever I want it. And I also can provide access for others to use my data whenever I want that to be happening. All right. Last slide here. What can you do? What is a very, very high level action points? So the first thing is that you need to gain some muscles around data. That means understanding the nature of data, knowing how you deal with data, how you store data, and what you want to do with it in the first place. So that is super important. When you have that, then it is valuable to think a little bit about this virtuous circle. It also helps maybe to explain what are the relations here. As a third point, you can definitely lever your brand power because brand, I skipped over that a little bit, but the brand really helps you to provide a shortcut for your customers. A brand is still something that gives people trust and reliability. And what we see very often is that companies that have a very, very strong brand, like the car manufacturers in Germany or also here in Sweden, they are struggling with bringing that brand experience that they have with their products, with their physical products. They're still struggling to bring that into the digital realm. And this is something, if you manage to do that and if you work on that, you can really use the brand for you to be successful here. And the last point is, don't forget to be a good citizen, to really consider the ethical aspects of data, because we are dealing with people in the end. And that's it from my side. Thank you very much. I guess we have some time for questions.
You want to deal with it? Any questions? Matti, hold on.
Yeah, perhaps first, Matti, working actually on new businesses at the Futurice. First question about the data topic. So you're talking a lot about like using data in a responsible manner. Having spent quite a lot of time in the other markets like China or US, what would you kind of how would you counter argue if I would say that like ethical use of data is just something that people like to talk about, but it's actually about speed, relevance, and the value of the product that really matters. So it's just like a lot of talk about data ethics, but the Chinese, the US companies don't really care, and they are winning.
Thank you very much, Matti. Yeah, it's a $1 million question about that. I think so one thing is that we might overemphasize this need for speed. Because there are also some new studies coming out that actually other factors that we have in a market economy that is secured by regulations, that is secured by laws, you actually have kind of a safe space for developing something which is way more stable and sustainable than having a market where you can do pretty much everything else, as long as it fits to some governments' ideas of what they want to do. So I think we should be very careful in not throwing that away and thinking, oh, the others are way more innovative. In some areas that might be true. With some applications of AI, we definitely see that, but it's definitely not the majority of it. And I think we should really see how can we balance that need for an open market where you can really do whatever you think, and on the other hand, for strong regulations that helps us as customers and companies in the end.
Yeah, and maybe I can add something that now the companies or the businesses might have an advantage because they handle the data, but as soon as the market and the consumer understands the value of its private data, the new business models might arise probably from there. So as we saw, there are already companies preparing to create not surveillance but coveillance. And as soon as you can connect micro dots of money with data points, this becomes a very magical thing, because then data and money are connected. But this is more the Bitcoin cyber money topic that's probably too far ahead. But I think there's more going to happen in the future. And companies are ahead now and trying to get advantage from that. And as I told before, markets in China might treat things differently than in Europe. So they have the competitive advantage now. but we need to see like how we can manage that. But it's difficult, I would say. There is no answer. Maybe you have one, and we need to come up with ideas and be creative on that as well. Thank you. Any more questions? Annika, you have one question.
Regarding diversity and inclusion, and traditionally the big car manufacturers are male, the old picture we saw. And with big data, with AI, it's crucial that we have diversity in the workforce. What's happening there in Munich and in Germany? How are companies talking about that? And not to bring in the same people again, because I see the trend here.
You see what?
I see that it's still the same people coming from KTH with data science that look the same as I did 15 years, my friends from KTH. And that's not that diverse. So by bigger data means more false algorithms if we don't have different perspectives. And also in the car industry, that's traditionally really, really traditional in that sense. What's going on there? Is there any talks? Are they working on it?
Very good question. I think what we constantly need to remind us is that the technology that we see right now, so rapidly increasing, the capabilities that we have don't mean that we don't need to ask the big questions anymore. It will not just solve those issues like inclusion and diversity. It will definitely not. It's something we need to discuss and develop in parallel. And that is the challenge, right? The world is speeding up, business is speeding up, and at the same time you need to really improve your standards, because it's a matter of standards, right? It's a matter of how you want to live and how you want to work in the 21st century. And data used in a right way can be an enabler, I guess, because data itself is super egalitarian. It doesn't care, right? But that means also it's a tool in your hands, and you need to use it very, very wisely. So, because we all know these discussions around biased AI and stuff like that. So, and coming really now to your questions, I think so. I see that in more and more conversations, the question around diversity and inclusion plays a role, but it's only very, very slowly beginning to catch up. It's not that it's part of each and every discussion in meetings around data or meetings around service creation. That's, but I see some hopes there, and I hope that it will catch up speed.
Giuseppe from IDEAN. Thanks for the interesting contents. I wanted to ask you, there was some points around ethics, but you haven't touched upon the transformation in terms of workforce. And I mean, if we're going from 2,500 components to 250, what happens to those manufacturers that were producing those components and kind of disappear? They need to be put in a different flow in terms of work life. But also, there is a gap of 70,000 people estimated in the IT businesses here in the Nordics. And how are companies going to fill all these data science positions, all these machine learning positions, which other countries are not necessarily filling, even though they have some advantage right now? So I feel that these talks are moving much faster than how society is kind of responding. So,
Yes, it's a very interesting question, and you can find the shift also like in the Industrial Revolution, so where the farmers suddenly lost all their jobs due to like the machinery and the industries, and it's not, you cannot put the same people into the new thing. So you have like a transition phase where you have to really think about your responsibility. So the big corporates have to think about, what are we going to do with the people who are so valuable, who have created the value of the company in the past? And Toyota is, for example, thinking into that direction when they go into the robotics development. Building these robots are mainly handmade, so you can't build a robot with a robot if you have to be so sensitive in the human-machine interaction. So they try to find a solution, be responsible in that sense. That's one example, how you can bring like the current people into like new roles, and we have to find solutions for that. And on the other hand, I mean, the gap of knowledge and expertise is everywhere. So as you explained, not only in the Nordics, but everywhere. And this is the problem of the speed of technology. So we are running behind. So every second you have managed to answer one question, 10 new questions and problems arise. So, and this is probably what's overwhelming everyone so much in every industry. So it's not only the mobility, it's not only the cars, it's like everyone seems to be overwhelmed from so many different perspectives. And one thing that we need, and this is probably building the bridge to this inclusion and diversity, we will solve this problem only if we put people from different perspectives together to find the right solutions. And I think this is probably one thing that can help us not to compete, but to collaborate and to cooperate to find the right solutions would be one way to tackle that. And then sometimes need to take out a bit of the speed because it's overwhelming. And you find a counter strategy to that, it's a digital detox. I mean, everyone who is totally overwhelmed goes to the countryside and pays a lot of money to get rid of this digital stuff. So maybe there's a human thing in that human nature solves its problems in itself. It's the way how you want to survive. And this is why I think resilience, so being resilient or becoming into the mood of resilience is key. There will be many open questions left, but it's up on us to work on that and find the society we want to live in. In the end, it comes to that, maybe. Did that help? Hopefully. Yes, any other questions? There's someone over here, another question. Yes, please.
Thank you. I think, Johannes, you touched upon it a bit. So all this data-driven technology and everything, it's also easier to duplicate or replicate, and then the human factor becomes even more important in the future. So could you elaborate on that a little?
Thanks. I don't even know where to start. It's so huge. I mean, it's really like when I was preparing that talk, I was really thinking about all that conversations that I have with my clients and the conversations, and they always go back to the point where we as humans, we have the tendency to look for solutions. And we want technology for us to solve things, and we want to build stuff, and we want to make progress very, very quickly. But I think at certain points in time, we really need to take a break, to really reflect on what we're doing, consider different routes that we can take, and then come up with maybe different approaches, with maybe approaches that are, I see that in my work, where we only begin to think about mobility or smart systems in a more holistic way, where you really consider what does that mean for the bigger ecosystem? What does it mean for a city if we introduce scooters that lie around everywhere, right? I mean, these are super big questions, and we are only about to think about it. And I think what we need to do first is to say, look, we are all humans here, so we have this tendency to quickly jump to solutions. Let's not do that. Let's intentionally slow down to speed up our thinking and develop certain possibilities how the future could emerge or how the future could develop, test those in a way that is not risky and that is not creating problems for all of us, and then move forward. And I really hope that, we touched on that a little bit earlier, that a structure like Europe, if we are improving that, can really be a haven for these kinds of conversations, because in a way, this is where we are super advanced. This is where our society and our environment for business and for people is very, very strong. And I hope that we go more and more in that direction.
Yeah, I think that was it. Time to... Oh, another more questions. What are we going to do?
Anyone wants to leave can leave. You, should I? Oh, should we do here and then you pass it? Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Yes. So I was thinking, since the number of components will be heavily reduced and all the development that is going into making data processing faster and faster, what will happen with the price in general of vehicles, and how will that affect, the way we think of vehicles even?
Thank you. Yes, that's a big topic, because the cars or the vehicles are becoming cheaper and cheaper. So the less complex they are, the less time you have for development, the more plug-and-play principles you have, the more components you can buy elsewhere and just put them together. That will lower the price. And of course, mass production will lower the price. So that's something that will influence very much the pricing level. And that's a big topic. So where does the business come from? And this is why the business innovation aspect is so important, finding new ways like to gain revenues, new payment models, leasing models, services, digital services you pay for. So it's a bit like, I don't know, the smartphone. So you buy the hardware and then you pay for the apps, you pay for the services, and then you have different payment models in there. And this will probably be some kind of direction the OEMs will go to, that you pay for the content and the software, and that like the vehicle is more like the hardware. And the challenge is who will win the race in the mobility journey and get like all these bits and pieces of revenue, and on which bank account will that money land? Yes.
Thank you for an interesting presentation. It's always great when good tech combines with ethics and discussions about humanity. I think good values and humanity should never go out of style. Let's hope it stays that way. So in that sense, how do we make sure that the new tech and AI and machine-based learning and all of these new fantastic things actually makes us preserve humanity and good values?
I think one thing we need is more leaders who are aware of that, who are leading the companies, especially in companies that are only about to transform in something new, where who only start to think about their hierarchies and the way how they incentivize their employees to compensation and things like that. I think having really good leaders on top of that, and if they are not there, then to help with coaching and training, just small things, step by step, to understand more of that. I wish that more and more leaders can make time in their super busy, crazy schedules to participate in conversations around emerging tech and ethics, and that these things become mandatory. And I think boards and councils can play a huge role in that. The more they demand behavior like that, the more it will be there. Because what we see, and again, this is the designer speaking, is the more you're exposed to these kinds of thinking, the more it will will define how you are as a person and define and influence your own behavior. So I think more exposure is definitely important there. Yeah, maybe that's at least a starting point. Yeah.
Yes, maybe I can add something and build on what you just said. There are probably several directions you can take. The one thing is education. It has to start everywhere where you educate the kids to understand, not only use technology for the fun, but also understand what is the purpose behind it. So I think this is a very crucial point. On the other hand, I see a very important or very interesting role as Europeans in this, because we have the feeling that China is rushing ahead with like all the digital and not taking care of any ethics, even when they reproduce humans that are like resistant to HIV. They just do what they want, and then they come up with solutions. So it seems like we are running behind like China and the US, who are the tech-savvy companies. They also have their topics. I find it very interesting to identify what is the European like positioning, and we are very, very strong in business ethics and ethics. If you look at Europe and especially the Nordics, this is a compliment for the Nordics, we are very, very strong in that. And I think that after that, everyone has rushed and is a bit in a burnout. That could be an excellent role for the European sides to like put this back into place. So that's an interesting thinking of what the role of Europe could be in that part.
I think the time is up, and thank you very much for your brilliant thoughts.